I mean, this is the...
Let's give it a second. It's still not it's provisioning storage
It's
in
it's
APEC.
spinning up a cluster for us to record stuff.
Now it's recording. Welcome, Internet. Today is the 3rd of March. We shifted by 1 week for world news reasons. And we will be talking about requirements for in-person stuff in Valencia. Over to you, Björn.
Yeah, so the reason why I would like to discuss it here in this forum is that if we just follow the vanilla procedure that is now in place for so-called project meetings, we get a 2-hour meeting on Monday in Valencia on day 0, or arguably day -1 of KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. And we could, I guess, use our karma points as a important CNCF project to get more than 2 hours, but I don't want to do that if in the end we end up with 2 hours using the room that we have fought for to have for more than 2 hours. And that's, yeah, what Richie just copied over all my thoughts. Like, do we want more than 2 hours? And if we really want more than 2 hours, we really should want it and use it. Then there was a discussion if we, I mean, we were pretty sure we wanted to have an opportunity for what is this? In-person, it's an in-person dev zone, right? For people who are not there in person to at least follow along or even contribute. And we could just bring some devices for that, then we don't have to ask CNCF. We were talking about a hackathon, not a formal one, but just have the option after the meeting, if some people think, okay, let's just start hacking on it, if we could have the room for that as well. And yeah, if that's all too much for CNCF to accommodate, we could also run something on our own, and I have no clue if we have budget for that. Yeah, and then the final question is, this is a day 0 event of KubeCon, so you cannot attend officially if you're not registered for KubeCon. I assume that's not a problem in this case because I don't know of any like usual suspect in Valencia that would just informally attend. So I guess most of the people, or all of the people who are in Valencia at this time and want to attend, are probably also attending KubeCon. But this assumption might be wrong. And that's why I wanted to discuss it with this larger forum. Okay, so yeah, please discuss all those questions.
Starting at the end, anything co-located with KubeCon and organized by CNCF needs a ticket, and that's just the way it is. So we like there's nothing to do about this. For PromCon and such, it's different, but for anything co-located with CNCF or with KubeCon, unless we do it completely outside of all of CNCF planning, is going to have the ticket requirement.
Yes, and that's the other question, right? What's the point where we would say, okay, let's not discuss with CNCF anymore. Let's use our magic budget we might have to just rent a room in Valencia, but not as part of the KubeCon event, which is what we did before at times as well, right? It was just, yeah, whatever's most convenient and what we can do. But yeah, I'm missing state. If this is getting too complicated, I'm also happy to hand this over to someone who has more context. But yeah, if I can just get it done, I'm the primary contact now because I filled the form. If I can get it done without involving others, even better. But that's what we want to find out.
Unless I'm misremembering, we actually agreed with Chris and Amy that we get a full room, like a complete room. And they wanted us to raise a ticket for it. So for this, I think maybe it needs to be done outside of normal CNCF planning, or we just tell them this, that we do this. But my last status is we have agreed with Chris and Amy that we get a full day room as like second project, blah, 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 blah. And we get to choose however we want to structure this. Given that we haven't seen each other in 2 years, I would go for the full day and we'll see what we end up with. And if we don't use every last microsecond, that's probably also okay. But I think we can more than fill a day of interaction.
So I understood the last CNCF thing as let's.
I wasn't at the last one. Sorry. If it changed, I wasn't at the last one.
It's not really changed because the ticket wasn't there yet. We decided let's just try to get this in on this normal way and then politely ask for more than 2 hours. And if that doesn't work, we could still escalate to Amy or Chris or just do our own thing, right? But Amy was pretty much like, please talk to the events team and we'll see what happens. Okay, so do we all feel we will fill the whole day easily and we should just ask for it?
I say yes.
The more people, I mean, I see nodding faces. Nobody says no. Who would say no to a whole day? I mean, the difference to past Dev Summits is that we have this virtual event now. So in the past Dev Summits, we usually had half a year of topics piled up. On the other hand, I find when I'm thinking about Dev Summit topics, I see a lot of topics where if we discuss them in this form here, it always ends up, that's a good idea, let's write a design doc and discuss it again. Like you never have this kind of brainstorming, intimate style of coming up with something together that you will have in person. And so I think I have a lot of topics I would discuss in more depth in a like more brainstormy, collaborative, whatever setting that we have with an in-person event.
Absolutely. Personally speaking, I also plan on just getting stuff done while we are all in a room, because it's a lot more fun to just do stuff when you're together in the same room every 2 years. I think we can more than fill this time with.
Okay, whole day means what would be the starting time?
Whatever is defined by CNCF as part of the
non-package. Have slots. Let's say whatever, 10 to 6, is that?
I would request a full day, and they have their schedule anyway. I mean, they need staff on site, they need someone to guard the door and all of those things, so they have a time plan, even if we don't know the time plan.
Okay, but if they tell me we have the venue from 6 a.m. to midnight, we probably don't want 6 a.m. to midnight.
We only show up at 7 in the morning and not at 6, easy. But we can solve this problem as we encounter it. I fully expect them to tell us you have the slot from this to that time.
Okay, I want ideally I have all the information, and I know if all of you tell me that you wouldn't show up before 10, that's an important piece of information. I can just wing this, but yeah.
I'll be here at 7 if we start at 7.
Yeah, but that might not be true for everyone. I don't know. Yeah, okay, some people. Okay, I mean, I'll use my best judgment for that, and if it's really getting weird, I can just ask on the list. Okay, equipment. Do we need any? Should we ask for any special equipment or just bring our own? I mean, they do have a projector by default, but yeah. I guess if you now ask for like live streaming hardware, they would might get weird. And if some, do we have like, has someone like, what was Richie? You mentioned that, right? This little thing, yeah.
I have bought this in 2020, anticipating all the travel I would be doing for Grafana.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so Richie will bring streaming equipment. Is that
a good microphone? Room microphone is maybe the more. Bartik is probably even more, but I mean, all of this is Etnis trivia. For the intents and purposes of CNCF, projector is good. Power outlets, chairs.
Yeah, I mean, no special requirements from CNCF, right? That's the. Okay, so the hackathon will just be, since we have the room for the whole day, it's included. Okay. Also, perhaps a good argument to raise with CNCF that we don't need to request an extra hackathon because we have the room for the whole day. But yeah, I mean, I guess if CNCF is getting weird, I will just hand this over to Richie because he is our battle cruiser to solve those things.
Okay.
But like, yeah, do we have? I mean, we had budget in Barcelona 8 eons ago for renting something on our own. Do we still have this kind of budget?
I can't tell you the number, but basically we have a budget of all the plus which we made with PromCon, which we can draw on if we so choose. I wouldn't be concerned about budget if we need to spend a few K. I don't think we need to, but we can.
Yeah, okay.
Like I wouldn't during CNCF week in the same city use the budget to buy something which is competing with KubeCon. That's not great, but we have enough.
The room, right? Is anyone planning in this room, in this virtual room, to be in Valencia during KubeCon, but not having a KubeCon ticket? Or do you know of anyone who is in that situation? Okay, because then I'll just, I mean, Richie said there's no point anyway. Yep, multiple people. Oh, Gautam, is that?
Yep, I know multiple people who plan to be in Valencia just to meet everyone, but won't be attending KubeCon.
Okay, I mean,
But I don't think we should change things for them.
no, I mean, not changing, but sometimes there were ways of like informally do something, but I would not have even tried if there is nobody, right? That would make sense. But okay, good to know that there might be some. So if we see an option to super informally, unofficially do something, we can try. Okay. I think I have enough information to do the next steps, and if that gets getting more complicated, I'll ask Prometheus team for like next steps to do. But hopefully it will just be smooth, and not more bureaucracy will be happening here. Perhaps it has nothing to do with CNCF. We should just be clear what our invitation policy is. Do we want to publicly advertise for interested people to attend, or what is this? Should be like a word of mouth thing as it was in the past? Like what do we want to do here?
I think we already discussed this. Basically, if people are near enough to us to know that it's happening, either through invitation or just following the various avenues over which we talked about this, just join. Like basically same as this call here, open to anyone, but you need to ask. Like we'll not carry it after you.
So we don't aggressively advertise it as like.
We can send email to developers list or such, I would say. So just basically like these calls, when we made this call here open, we also Twitter, mailing list, blah blah blah, reached out. Arguably, it's better to maybe not do like full Twitter and everything, more like dash developers and such. But yeah, if you follow what we talk about closely enough to be aware of this, or someone invites you, as long as the room is not full. And I think Chris mentioned it's like 50-ish being the baseline for the rooms which they have. So So just for form and for the ones who I don't track if everyone here is the first time here. So at any point in time, please speak up even, or in particular, if you're not Prometheus team, unless we have a call for consensus, at which point, please don't. Just for form consensus, we will aim for a full day. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Oh. Julian, right API. Is Julian here? No. Write APIs, but I also want this, so I'll just read it out. But I'll use Julian voice because he wrote it. I'd like to change the scope of Prometheus configuration and next to file-based config, enable database-back configuration. Goal is to have read-write APIs to configure rules and scrape jobs. The backend would likely be etcd. Long term, we could often embedded etcd. Secrets would still not be readable from the API. I'd like to roll a full design doc if we agree that we want this. I thought about this in the context of Grafana stuff quite a bit and for quite some time. I am on the etcd thing, I'm not convinced. My own thinking was that we basically, and like for the agent and such, we could have a system where we basically have a file, a configuration file, which just live in, and we just parse this file and use this as the reference. The beauty of this design is we would be detaching the syntax of the thing from where the thing lives. Of course, at that point, it doesn't matter if it's a local file, if it's a remote file, if it's in memory and changed through an API. The thing which I would still love to see is like built-in Git server and I can push to it, but never happened. I can dream. But the point is I would like to retain the basic property of having a file and treat this as if it was a file. As a second potential stop, as a second potential step, we could then have like APIs where you actually can do partial commits, you can do partial configuration, blah, 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 blah. But that would be built on top of basically pretending we still have that file. That was my thought about around this back then.
I talked a bit with Julian around that, and he told me he explicitly wants etcd as a database. Why? I'm not sure, but I think it's because of the watching feature. I think. And on my side, I think it's a great idea as well, because etcd is a great database for configuration, and it's more or less treated as file, except in etcd. The only concern is that etcd is not really easy to install, configure, operate, blah blah blah. And my other question will be how much it will go on the. It will override the Prometheus operator, because once you said okay, we support etcd, you have one step more to say okay, we support CRDs, because if you follow the same syntax that Kubernetes, you can say yeah, you can configure Prometheus through the CRDs directly, and can be interesting. But maybe Prometheus operator won't be so happy with this decision.
I would say the Prometheus operator is somewhat distinct from the problem we're discussing. It would be just a separate way of integrating with Prometheus on Prometheus side. Whether we generate a config file and mount that into Prometheus container and then load that, or there's some sort of way of pushing updates to an etcd, that really doesn't really matter for the Prometheus operator itself. So,
okay.
yeah, I wouldn't say the Prometheus operator conflicts. It could be maybe better integrated, kind of like what you said, like the watches would be kind of propagated, like config changes would be propagated a lot more quickly, but that's really it, I would say.
Yeah. And yeah, Julian has the same idea than you, Matthias, that it won't conflict with Prometheus Operator because he foresees this requirement outside of Kubernetes. Because in Kubernetes, you have multiple different ways to configure Prometheus directly already in place and that are working great.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it also is distinct from the Prometheus operator set, I would say.
Mm.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, I think we needed to prove how much better or what's the benefit compared to yet another sidecar that it's just doing all of this, writes it to a local file, which could be in memory, and SIGOPS Prometheus. I mean, following this whole, we shouldn't put all the features into one binary and just have different tools that work together, which at some point could be ridiculous, but I think this discussion should be made, for example, in the design doc when discussing alternatives.
On my side, I think it's fair to say Prometheus could be configured through, well, thanks to a database, whatever it means, whatever is the database. And then the choice of etcd is another question. But yeah, I would not see any counter argument to say why we don't support database. Okay, it's great, it works with file, but it could work as well with a database. If it supports the same kind of format, like we don't change the format, we just push basically the file directly in the database, it works.
I mean, what I was talking about is to not
super ugly, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
What I was talking about is to not put this feature into Prometheus directly, as we already have a lot of stuff in Prometheus where people start to complain about the size of the binary and following that Unix philosophy, and just have a separate binary that reads from, let's say, etcd, creates a file locally on the same host as Prometheus, and SIGOPS Prometheus. And from the outside, it looks exactly the same as if Prometheus is doing that in itself. It's just like this modular thing. And this is the line of argument we usually had why we don't support TLS. And we stopped to do this because we said it's just ridiculous. You have a sidecar, that's not for Prometheus itself, it's also for exporters, right? Exporters running in the sidecar, and then you need a sidecar for the sidecar to run, to have TLS scraping enabled for the exporter. And that's where it gets ridiculous. And we had cases where we had the sidecar for the sidecar for the sidecar, which perhaps it's actually not that bad, but then we decided TLS is just so, it should just be everywhere, right? It's ubiquitous, and we shouldn't require people to put this in a separate binary. And the question is a database-backed configuration on the same level, where it should be something that is natively in the Prometheus binary, or is it actually better to have it as a separate tool so that the core Prometheus binary still reads the config from a file? I'm not saying I would fight for that. I'm saying we should, this should be in the discussion. If like there should be a clear benefit of the new solution over the one that one could implement already now by just creating this additional tool that runs in a sidecar.
Yeah, I'm still missing the kind of the real goal or problem statement that this is trying to solve for the most part. Like having a type etcd integration, why? And like, is it for having like subsets of the config being instantly applied, meaning like there are watchers, and then because of that, like applying new config changes gets super fast, which is, I think, oftentimes what people now are complaining, that it like is more eventual consistent. Like, is that a problem that is trying to be solved with this? Or like, yeah, I think there's a bit missing.
Well, the watcher part is my fault personally. It's not written on the document, so because that would be the choice of etcd, because the watcher is a great feature and it works super well, but otherwise it could be consul, for example, if we don't use this feature. And Bartek put a comment on that, saying like you, Bjorn, that we can do it in a different project and not in Prometheus direct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying like there's still parts missing on why specifically at CD, right?
Yeah.
As Bartek pointed out, we have similar things. Sorry, Bartek. Go ahead.
No, yeah. So just to confirm, like maybe you should iterate over it, but there is definitely a benefit in having like define and an API really for uploading rules and scrape jobs and kind of have this as a standard. So that's definitely beneficial for ecosystem alone. But you know, in terms of specific implementation, yeah, I guess we could iterate with some kind of plugins or something, but I wouldn't push with this, you know, very tight integration with etcd for sure. Although as something like pluginable, like service discovery, why not? But again, does it has to be single binary in Prometheus? It's kind of crazy, but everyone hates sidecars. Yeah, maybe we could start simple.
Yeah, but the idea is to have it outside of Kubernetes, because in Kubernetes you have many different things. So if you are saying, okay, we can have a sidecar, then you have already in mind it's working in Kubernetes. So,
No, you can have it as a separate process. It doesn't have to be close to Prometheus even, right? Some kind of API proxy which talks to database.
yeah.
And then, yeah, have a way for Prometheus. I mean, this proxy could essentially write to a file shared between Prometheus. So, but yeah, it's kind of harder, yeah, outside of Kubernetes. Maybe, I don't know, maybe so we are guessing why etcd was chosen, but
Yeah,
some
it
idea.
would be better if Julian was there.
Yeah, some cool idea behind etcd is that you might be able to scale scraping horizontally automatically, right? So we could put Prometheus agent or Prometheus and essentially try to assign targets through etcd, I guess, easier, but there are lots of problems with this anyway, like no matter what database you use. But I don't know, maybe that's a message here.
Maybe as an intermediate consensus, do I read the room correctly that we are basically okay with having APIs to write configuration?
I'm not sure directly in Prometheus, but the idea is great. And the question is...
experimental feature, blah, blah, blah. I mean,
yeah, should we do it in Prometheus or in a different project? And we try it, and if it's great, we could think again to put it back in Prometheus directly. I think that's more or less what we said.
I mean, I would phrase it as if there is some proven benefit. If there's no proven benefit compared to a separate binary doing this job for you, I would always go for the separate binary. That's the same thing as we could also integrate push gateway into Prometheus and whatever. I mean, there are so many things you could all put into a giant binary that usually work together, which we still don't, right? So, I mean, should be. I'm not like dogmatically against anything like based on we only have one way of configuring or something, but yeah, I want to see a proven benefit. And Brian has raised his hand.
Yeah, I think we have some experience of doing this kind of thing in Cortex. And it didn't really go that well. I mean, it's essentially we added an API for rules, and then eventually, well, quite soon we realized it wasn't a very perfect API, so we wanted to change it. And then a bit later, it turned out we didn't I mean, the first implementation had a database, and then a bit later, people thought we really want something more like an S3 bucket. And at the end of the day, syncing for 2 files read by Prometheus is basically what it does today, and it's not obviously terrible. Yeah, I guess maybe just the bottom line is that doing it in a way that you can iterate and not kind of bake it in and then regret it for years. It would be my tip.
I mean, the easiest way for an initial thing is to just do a stupid file and flip the storage out, because you don't read a local file anymore. And we can also time bomb it so it goes away for certain or something. I think we're in a little bit of a catch-22 where we need to figure out if it's actually useful and how it explodes if it explodes. So experimenting.
I mean, Julian was asking for what was the wording? I'd write a full design doc if you agree that we want this. I would say it depends on the design if we want it, right? If the design doc, the result of the design doc is there is no feasible design, we don't want this. Or if the result of the design doc is there's actually better alternatives. But I would be totally I'm not against it, and I think we should. A design doc would help here, and I mean every design doc has the caveat of if the result of the design doc is that we don't want to do it that way, then we don't do it that way.
Yeah, and you want a proof of benefits and why we foresee the requirement, the needs. That would be a first start. Even without a design, if you have a good argument like in this context, in this configuration, I need a huge, I have a huge changes, frequency of changes of my rule, alert rule, then yeah, probably you want to fast reload of the alert rule without reloading Prometheus or using the endpoint of reloading. Something like that.
So we kind of agreed that we want the design doc.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. Or at least ask to Julian what use case he has in mind.
That was part of the intention with the earlier. So let's have a call for consensus of wanting to explore this in a design doc. And for anyone who doesn't like HCD, they are free to write a competing design doc or contribute to Julian's or whatever. But basically, we open up this avenue of exploration.
Yeah.
Moment. Exploring. Consensus. We are open to exploring APIs in one or more design docs. We could not reach consensus on etcd or other specific technologies. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
Agree.
Very good. Das sind zwei. We have duck. Ingestion delay. Sorry, I need to check if we know that it's actually not. We didn't yet talk about this. So let me. I hate Google Docs. Just a second. There you go. Björn, over to you.
I think
You're
Bjorn-
muted. Still muted.
Okay, now I got everything in place again. This is kind of not like a concrete technical suggestion, more like a discussion that I would run with the group. This is one of those topics that would probably work much better in an on-person offsite, but if we don't have very competing topics, I would still be happy to discuss it now. I don't know if that was a super close race in the agenda items, and there's something that might be like more tangible to handle in 20 minutes.
Metal, Matze, and Simon, Emerson FSX. We can also talk about that one.
I mean,
That-
as that.
And this one will probably be quick, the one from
Quick, yeah.
Matthias. Yeah.
Okay, I'll pull it
Myself.
forward. Just a moment. There we go.
Yeah, the TLDR really, we had someone in the Prometheus operator repository telling us that they use Amazon FSX file system, and they had like a special setup that was not working with the Prometheus operator, so they want basically an enhancement to the custom resource definition so that they can accomplish their use case. And we were curious just to ask the audience if anybody has experience with AWS FSX and if we would consider that to be supported somehow. I think Bjorn kind of mentioned that looks like NFS somehow. So I've looked a bit into the characteristics of FSX. That's kind of an abstraction on top of another concrete file system, like can be Loost or anything else like NetApp, I think. So they have an integration. So yeah, if anybody has some experience with it, please share. Otherwise, I guess we'll get back to, well, we don't know if it's supported or not really.
The use case they had was that they want to have one volume and multiple servers writing to that volume.
Yeah.
I think that's where it came up, and then it really sounded a lot like NFS, where you have like one volume, multiple servers writing and reading, and yeah, it's kind of like the question is, does fsync work on this properly? Can we, as Prometheus, say this is something we support? And I don't know, as Simon said, like, does anyone know if this is something we can say that's okay or not?
So yeah,
Okay.
I guess it's too early for anybody playing with
So
it.
maybe we can reach out to folks from AWS and ask if they can point us to someone to tell us a bit more, and if there's something that's like okay for Prometheus to use or something along those lines.
I'm at AWS, not in any group associated with
Okay, yeah.
FSX. So maybe hit me up and I can try to get you in touch with the right people.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll
Cool.
do.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's really it on the topic, so we can go to the other one that Björn had.
Okay. Björn, if you want to delay, I also have one more on the backlog if you want to completely fine either way. You're still muted. I see your head shaking, but
Aggressive with muting because I'm coughing. What's the other one on the backlog?
just a moment. Warnings, annotation, stats for query results. That's also by you. Support for prefix adding labels to metrics and client libraries. And a super old one, but I think yeah, we have Augustine, and we have Bartek, so we can also talk about Prometheus UI sharing with Thanos. So I think that's slightly old, but it's still on the backlog, and Bartek didn't yet delete it. So those are the options. Someone make a call. I don't care.
I mean, the prefix adding labels is a bit of a philosophical discussion as well, but it's very concrete, as in there's a Python pull request, I think, or feature request to have this. So that might be something that's perhaps shouldn't wait. And the stuff about warning annotations, blah, 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 would also be like a question and could initiate something. Perhaps some people would work on it even before KubeCon. So I think these are all a bit more urgent than the ingestion delay thing, which I think it's also important, but it would trigger something more involved, I think, if we want to act on it. So Bartek, is Bartek driving? Looks like it.
Yeah, I am. So for UI topics, I would need, front end experts there that previously worked with our UI sometimes on Prometheus. So let's organize this with them. Yeah, I can try to arrange that. Maybe they will be in Valencia, but we need those people.
Okay, so what's the room's favorite topic then? Or Chris, how urgently would you like to talk about this prefix thing?
We can talk about it. No one's really responded to this PR, so it's not super urgent, but I'm happy to talk about it for these 15 minutes.
Perhaps that's
Sure.
a good 15 minutes topic, right? The prefixing.
Yeah. So yeah, the question kind of comes down to, in client Golang, there are a couple functions. One that adds a prefix to all metrics that are registered with a register, and the other one adds labels, adds some sort of static label to everything with that register. These functions can be abused, I would say, where you start having, instead of go routines, you would put in my service go routines or things like that, which can create a whole lot more just surface area of metric names. And similarly, some people will probably use the adding labels instead of go routines. Adding labels they might use instead of target discovery. That said, there are some real use cases for each of these. For example, adding labels, you might be reusing the code in slightly different ways, and you actually do want like a queue label or something like that, and there's 5 different queues. We kind of do something like that in the remote write code. So my question is kind of, do we want to have these functions in more libraries? Do we want to not have them because they are prone to being misused? I don't have a particularly strong view either way, so I would love to hear what other developers think.
I mean, I can explain the context why they were introducing Klein Golang. Does that make sense? I mean, the one problem is that we explored different ways of how to hand around instrumentation. For example, I mean, the hardest case is essentially if you provide a library and you want in some way allow the library user to influence how the library is instrumented, right? But there's also the other way where even if you control the whole code base, you might have this, that you want to hand something in that this other part of the code base should deal with, and this could be a registry that then registers metrics with it. We also had, like in the client Golang, whatever nomenclature, you could hand in collectors and stuff like that. Like there are different points in the stack where you can do this, and we tried a few of them. But I think this is a relatively new thing that you can add labels and even prefixes with on the registry or registrar in Go lingo level. I think this, I mean, Bartek is also here. He is now the maintainer of the library, and I don't know if Kemal is here. I think this has gotten the most traction, in my opinion, and was the least annoying way of doing this. So in that way, the label thing, I think, is relatively common if you have multiple instances of the same thing, and they all have the same metrics, but they want to add a label instance, whatever, XYZ. And that works quite well with a registrar, that you can just give this to this instance and already have it wrapped with a certain label so that this instance doesn't have to deal with that. The prefix thing is, I think, more for the library approach if you have kind of a dependencies that others use. And sometimes you have this where the label, the metric name in the library is super generic and it's meant to be prefix, right? We have this where, like, we have Prometheus _ something, but I mean, we had this prominently when we wanted TSDB to have like different prefixes, and later found out, no, actually, this should never have different prefixes. But there are those cases where kind of the same metric exposed by a library just has a different meaning and should have a different prefix. Those cases also exist. They are all pretty power user cases, but I think they are all legitimate enough to have this functionality. Now, this could be something that is particularly, the need is particularly strong for Go, where you write a lot of libraries, and perhaps in Python, it doesn't, I don't know, it would be a strong statement to say Python doesn't have this library ecosystem, because it probably does. So in general, I'm also more for providing those tools with documentation than not providing these tools, because there's the danger of abusing them. But yeah, Bartek, I don't know what your current feeling is about those wrappers.
No, I think I fully agree with you. And something to point out is that there is a need in both of those functions. Yeah, labels probably more, prefix less, but still there is a need. And it's kind of easy to implement your own helper that will do this. So I think we should, at the end, we should educate people why adding prefixes and changing the yeah, as you said really nicely, Chris, like change the variety of metric names you have. You put it in a better words, but essentially we have to essentially explain people, how to write those components which gives metrics, because we even have, like, when you create a new metric, you have this namespace label, not label, but like part of the name. So you put a namespace, right? So people thought that, oh, so I need to indicate that this is HTTP requests from my project called A. And maybe that's great, but also, you kind of want uniform HTTP request, I don't know, monitoring. So maybe this metric name should be always HTTP request and not have a prefix of namespace. I don't know, like, I think those cases were kind of overused. So maybe with good documentation, with good education, we can put those wrap prefix just fine. We cannot remove it from client Golang. We need education, that's my point, on documentation for this. And even maybe we don't agree on some details on this naming, but we cannot escape this kind of education part, really.
I mean, it's also interesting because like Prometheus itself doesn't follow this. Like we use Prometheus HTTP metrics.
Yeah,
So like
and while I was explaining exactly, and while I was explaining this abuse, in some way, this might be not abuse because this special library that implements the HTTP request maybe treats maybe there is a different behavior of those metrics. So you don't want to use the same tooling, the same dashboard, the same alerting for those, right? So there is some trade-off here.
I also remember an ancient consideration where essentially if you have only HTTP request, whatever, HTTP request count, HTTP requests total, so right, and counter for HTTP request, which is always called HTTP request total. And now you have various tiers inside your one binary because you have like, let's say you have two HTTP routers wrapped for some reason, right? Because one library gives you one, and then you send all your requests to that library, and then you have your own stuff which has another router. And now if they all use the same metric name and you scrape that binary, you think I can just sum up all HTTP requests total and I get the total amount of HTTP requests, and then you get double counting because you have two different tiers where this goes through, and then you could say the one is the whatever, proxy, reverse proxy, HTTP request total, and the other one is something else, and then it would still make sense to sum on a specific metric name. That definitely was a consideration. I'm not sure how relevant this is with our current experience, but I think that was also where this was coming from, that in Prometheus, we have Prometheus underscore HTTP something something. Although within Prometheus, we don't do this doubling, right? We don't have another HTTP layer where all the HTTP requests are counted again.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a big problem in things like C-Advisor, where like you will get CPU metrics for a pod and for each container in the pod. And if you just naively sum it, you just have everything doubled.
Yeah. I think there was this idea, if you have like something stacked and something goes through all those stacks, each stack should have its own label, name, metric name prefix. And I think this is also where like this old subsystem namespace thing, which is like a very, very ancient idea. And it never, I mean, it was always a bit weird because it was never real namespacing, it was just prefixing. And this is where this is all coming from. But I'm also not sure that like metric name prefix is just should never happen, right? It definitely happens, and I think it also makes sense sometimes. Just like, do we need this flexibility to have tooling for doing this programmatically? Not sure. Needs some studying. But yeah, the label thing is, Bartek says it's amazing, right? So at least that one could happen, and
so
I don't know.
Could be, yeah. So I mean, it seems like is there consensus that we should have the label type, like the ability to add labels to a set of metrics? Like, is that worth a call for consensus?
With the big warning, don't.
With the big warning, don't use this on every single one of your metrics.
Exactly. If you do that, then probably you want target labels. That's what's also written in the Go docs.
Yeah.
This discussion is partially replaying parts of open metrics discussions where we also thought about prefixes, yes, no, things which were considered. Distinct label with the disadvantage of having this applied to everything, and that's not great in Prometheus land. Having double underscore, like foobar underscore underscore, or a well-defined label name. Of course, this basically cheats a little bit because you can't define more than one underscore namespace underscore label, and it's reserved, blah, blah, blah. In the end, we came up with simply not doing it because we couldn't find consensus. Back then, my own preference would have been doing whatever underscore is the label name. In the meantime, I think I've come to the conclusion that if this is done, it needs to be done in one specific reserved or well-defined and otherwise blocked label underscore underscore namespace underscore underscore to prevent people having funny ideas with other stuff. And this is basically summarizing
Yeah.
2 years of discussion into the least bad approach, and it still stinks.
Yeah.
And you're basically introducing a second name at this point, and you need to be aware of this. Of course, the problem we are having is we know how to deal with this, and we know how to hold it and what to actually do. But over time, if we degrade the overall user experience by allowing weird stuff to happen and blessing the weird stuff, we are paying for this with future adoption, feature velocity, and everything.
Yeah. So maybe. So yeah, like maybe for now, like we could add the labels ones. Let's keep the prefixing out. Yeah, it does cause a lot of headaches.
But
that
what
seem-
label? One starting and
Whatever
ending
labels
with
you want.
underscore underscore. So
No,
it's-
like this isn't a namespace. This is just like I
Some
want to
labels,
add Q XYZ and Q ABC or something as like I spun up 2 sets of the same thing that are working in the same process. So like this would be like in Prometheus, like where we do this would be like remote write. You can define 5 different remote write destinations. They all have the same metrics with one label that's different. And we want to say register each of those sets of metrics with label Q equals whatever its identifier is. So that's the wrap register with function.
Yeah, so do the label thing and more research needed for prefixing.
Yeah.
With, I mean, outcome could be what Bardet wrote, perhaps even deprecated in Klein Rolling. But yeah. I mean, we're out of time anyway, so I think we can't have a more detailed result here. More research needed is also a good conclusion.
I mean, we can maybe just start the next one on the same topic, unless someone strongly disagrees. Of course, then I mean, we can also run over, but we said we could experiment with extending dynamically, but Gotham already left. So yeah, let's cut
a bunch
it
of
here.
people are dropping. Like, I don't think it makes sense to run over.
No, totally fine. So let's cut it here, and I'll just move this for as a front-loaded topic for the next time, and we just continue.
Right.
Planned and everything of
Bye,
us.
everyone.
I'm shocked. See ya.
Bye bye.
Thanks, you.